Scene fades to ancient marketplaces, traders exchanging gold and goods. Before there were dollars, euros, or yen, there was trust. In ancient Mesopotamia, Egypt, and China, people traded what was real: grain, livestock, gold, silver, things that had intrinsic value. Gold, in particular, became the universal language of wealth. It didn't rot, it didn't rust, it couldn't be printed or faked. It represented real effort, labor, mining, craftsmanship, and it connected civilizations from Africa to Asia. But as trade expanded, something began to change. Carrying gold was risky, heavy, and inconvenient. So powerful merchants, especially in China's Tang Dynasty and later in medieval Europe, began issuing paper receipts for stored gold. Each note represented real gold kept in a vault. People could redeem it anytime. That was the birth of paper money, not as wealth itself, but as a claim to it. But here's where the silent war began. The moment someone realized that people rarely redeem their notes, the temptation appeared. What if we issue more paper than we have gold? It was a small idea, but it would change the world forever. Rise, the age of bankers and empires. Cut to European cities, Venice, Amsterdam, and London, rising power and trade. By the 1600s, the world's financial map was being redrawn. Empires no longer fought over land alone, they fought over credit. In Amsterdam, the world's first central bank, the Bank of Amsterdam, began managing the flow of deposits and notes, stabilizing trade. But it also introduced a dangerous precedent. It blurred the line between money and promises of money. Then came the Bank of England in 1694. A private institution granted the right to issue paper notes backed by gold. At first, the gold was real, but over time, the ratio shifted. Fewer coins in the vault, more paper in circulation. This was the birth of fractional reserve banking, a system where banks only kept a fraction of real money on hand, lending out the rest as debt. Each new loan created new money, money that didn't exist before. And just like that, the balance of power shifted from those who owned wealth to those who could create it out of thin air. Governments loved it. Wars could now be funded with printed promises instead of collected gold. Merchants and bankers became the new kings. Empires were no longer built with swords, but with signatures. The breaking point. The gold standard cracks. Scene, 19th and early 20th century, ships, colonies, industrial revolution, then World War I. As the industrial age exploded, so did demand for credit. Nations needed railways, armies, and factories, and gold couldn't keep up with the ambition of politicians. So they did what every empire eventually does. They promised more than they could pay. World War I was the first major global test. To fund it, nations suspended gold backing and printed vast quantities of currency. When the war ended, people returned to redeem their paper for gold, and there simply wasn't enough. Inflation erupted. Savings evaporated. By the 1930s, the illusion began to crack. In 1933, U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt made a shocking move. He banned private ownership of gold. Americans were forced to exchange their gold for paper dollars at a fixed rate. Then the government devalued the dollar overnight. Gold was gone and paper was king. The message was clear. Real wealth now belonged to the state. Citizens were left with IOUs. This wasn't just economic policy. It was the first open victory in the war between real wealth and paper money. The global turning point, Bretton Woods and beyond. 1944 Bretton Woods Conference, diplomats, flags, typewriters. After World War II, the global financial system needed a reset. At the Bretton Woods Conference in 1944, world leaders made a new pact. Every major currency would be pegged to the US dollar, and the dollar would be backed by gold. The United States became the anchor of global money, promising to convert dollars into gold on demand. But behind the scenes, something sinister was happening. As the Cold War began and spending exploded, the U.S. quietly printed more dollars than it had gold to back. Other nations, especially France, noticed. By the 1960s, countries started demanding